Hey Internet. My name is Ava. If you'd asked 8-year-old me who my hero was, I would have said Rick without even thinking. He was the man who fixed leaky faucets, who showed up at every school concert with a camera that actually worked, who wore steel-toe boots and always smelled faintly of sawdust and peppermint gum. He wasn't my real dad, but he acted like one. At least, that's what Mom always said. He's the dad who chose you, Ava. Your real father walked away. That line was practically a bedtime story in our house. Rick chose us. Rick stayed. Rick saved us. And I believed every word of it. I grew up in a script that had already been written. Mom played the exhausted, wronged mother, always working, always holding us together. Rick was the steady rock, the man who came along and made us whole again. And my biological father, Evan, was the villain who abandoned ship before I was even old enough to remember his face. At school, when people asked about my dad, I'd say, he left when I was a baby. It rolled off my tongue like something practiced in front of a mirror. People would nod and look sad, and I'd get that tiny rush of sympathy, the same one Mom got when she talked about doing it all alone until Rick came along. Rick leaned into the role, too. He was the kind of man who loved to fix things: cars, doors, people. Especially broken families. He had a voice that could fill a room, a handshake that left your knuckles aching, and a way of making you feel small if you ever challenged him. But back then, I didn't see that as control. I saw it as confidence. Safety. He'd pat my head and say, "You're lucky your mom found me when she did. You'd have turned out wild otherwise." And Mom would smile like it was a compliment. There are moments burned into my childhood like old photographs. Rick showing me how to change a tire in the driveway while the rain came down sideways. Rick building my brother Eli's bunk bed in one night, muttering, "Your dad couldn't even fix a picture frame." Rick paying for my braces when Mom's insurance lapsed, telling her, "Don't worry, I've got our kids covered." Our kids. He said it so often it became law. We were his, now the proof of his goodness, the trophies of his sacrifice. It wasn't until years later that I realized how carefully he'd curated that image. Back then, though, it felt like love. Mom and Rick's version of the past was airtight. Evan, my real dad, was painted as the kind of man who disappeared when things got hard. A dreamer, a drifter, someone who couldn't keep a job or handle responsibility. Mom said he missed birthdays. That he never sent money. That he made promises and broke every one. Whenever I asked what happened to him, she'd say, "He left, baby. That's all you need to know." And Rick would add, "Don't waste time on ghosts." I learned early on that questions about Evan closed doors. Literally. Mom's voice would tighten, Rick's jaw would clench, and the temperature in the room would drop by 10 degrees. So I stopped asking. Rick could be loud without shouting. That's how he kept control, a certain kind of silence that filled the house. If we disappointed him, low grades, forgotten chores, he didn't need to yell. He'd sigh, shake his head, and say, "After everything I've done for you." And that was enough to make me cry. He wasn't cruel, exactly. Just conditional. Love was a reward, not a given. And when you're a kid who's been told you were saved, you learn fast how to be grateful for your rescuer. Mom was different around him too. Softer in public, smaller at home. When they argued about bills, mostly, she'd switch into apology mode so quickly it made my head spin. Sometimes I'd catch her crying at the kitchen table, and Rick would say, "See what he did to her? That's why she can't handle stress." He always said he'd never your dad. And suddenly, all those years of practiced gratitude started to feel like guilt. Childhood felt like a movie I'd already seen too many times, familiar, predictable, but comforting in its repetition. Every family has its script, ours just happened to have a villain. And that villain's name was Evan. If you had walked into our house when I was 9, you'd have seen a fridge covered in spelling tests and pictures of stick figures holding hands. You'd have seen Rick in the recliner, newspaper spread open, TV droning low. You'd have seen Mom in the kitchen, humming, eyes fixed on the pot like it might boil wrong if she looked away. It looked normal. It even felt normal. But the air was always heavy, like the house itself remembered things it wasn't allowed to say. We didn't talk about Evan much, but his absence was everywhere. When Father's Day came around, our class made paper ties with glitter and macaroni noodles. The teacher said, "Give this to your dad." I said, "He's gone," in a tone so practiced it didn't even hurt anymore. She gave me a look of pity that made me hate her instantly. Rick wasn't there that year, he was on a job site, but Mom said, "We'll give it to him later." She took the tie from me, said she'd keep it safe, and I never saw it again. I didn't question it. I just stopped making Father's Day crafts. Rick's presence filled the void so completely that it was easy to forget it had ever been empty. He taught Eli how to swing a hammer, told Lily she'd break hearts someday, and made us all memorize his rules of life. Don't rely on anyone to save you. Always say thank you when someone helps you. Never forget who feeds you. He said that last one the most often. Mom laughed the first time he said it. "You make it sound like we're strays," she joked. Rick smiled. "Just housebroken ones." When I think back, I realize how early the conditioning started. Even his name became off-limits. Looking back, I can see the edges of the illusion. Little things. Like how the few pictures we had from before Rick came along disappeared one summer when Mom cleaned out old boxes. Or how every time I asked to see my birth certificate, she said it was somewhere safe. Or the day Eli came home from school in 4th grade and asked why our last names didn't match on the attendance sheet, and Rick made a joke out of it so Mom wouldn't have to answer. But I didn't see any of that then. Back then, I saw a man who worked double shifts and still came home to eat dinner with us. Who coached my softball team. Who called me kiddo in a tone that made me feel like I belong somewhere. And belonging is a powerful drug when you've been told you almost didn't have it. I think the first crack appeared the summer I turned 17. Rick and I were in the garage changing the oil in his truck. He was telling one of his usual stories about how he stepped up when no one else would. But then he said something I can't forget. He wiped his hands on a rag, looked at me, and said, "Your father didn't deserve you." I made sure of that. He said it with pride, like it was a good thing. And for the first time, I wondered what exactly he meant. When I asked Mom later, she told me to drop it. "Rick just means he fought for us," she said, not meeting my eyes. Don't twist things. But it stayed in my head, that line. I made sure of that. After high school, I moved out for college, and for a while, the distance softened everything. I called on Sundays. I came home for holidays. I didn't question anything because it was easier not to. Rick was still the hero, Mom still the survivor, and Evan, whoever he really was, stayed a ghost. Until last year. Until I came home to help Mom clean out the attic. Until I found the box. Until I saw my name written on a stack of envelopes I never received. To her, Dad meant Rick, the man who gave her piggyback rides and corrected her grammar. She once said, "If the old dad comes back, can we keep both?" Rick laughed so hard he nearly cried. Mom didn't. Eli was the first one to push back, even just a little. He was 12, moody, and brave in that reckless way middle school boys are. One night, we were watching a movie about a dad reuniting with his kid. Eli muttered, "Maybe ours would have come back if we'd tried to find him." Rick muted the TV so fast the sound crackled. "What did you say?" Eli froze. Rick leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You think that man wanted to see you? You think he cared? That's the kind of man who leaves and never looks back." Mom said nothing, just stared at the floor. Eli didn't answer, but that night, I heard him crying quietly in his room. The next morning, his window was open and the air smelled like rain. He didn't talk to Rick for weeks after that. As we got older, the mythology solidified. Rick was our savior, Evan was our curse. Any evidence to the contrary got quietly edited out of the narrative. One summer, when I was 14, a postcard arrived. It was addressed to Ava Lawson. Mom saw it first. She froze, then ripped it in half and threw it in the trash. When I asked what it was, she said, "Spam." I didn't believe her, but I also didn't dig it out. The next day, the trash was gone. That's the thing about growing up in someone else's version of history, it becomes easier to comply than to question. And for a long time, compliance looked like peace. Rick had a saying, "The past is a dead animal, don't go digging it up." It sounded wise when I was young. Now it just sounds like a confession. By the time I graduated high school, we looked like the perfect blended family. Rick shook my principal's hand, Mom cried happy tears, Eli smiled for the camera, and Lily held a bouquet she'd picked from the yard. Anytime one of us acted out forgetting chores, talking back, asking for too much, Mom's voice would lower, calm but sharp. "You're lucky Rick's patient," she'd say. "He doesn't have to take care of you, you know." We'd nod, apologize, and feel the shame settle deep. It wasn't abuse exactly. It was gratitude weaponized. Rick never raised a hand, but he didn't need to. He controlled the air we breathed. He'd leave tools scattered across the kitchen table, bills half paid, his moods half hidden. If you walked too loudly, he'd sigh. If you stayed too quiet, he'd ask if you were sulking. Every move felt like stepping on eggshells that no one else could see. Eli once asked Mom why Rick got so angry when we mentioned money. She said, "Because he's tired, honey. He works hard for us." But Eli was only 8, and he didn't understand how someone could work that hard and still never seem happy. I remember one night, a Tuesday, I was doing homework at the kitchen counter. Rick came home late, dirt on his jeans, and opened the fridge. He frowned. "Why's the milk gone?" Mom started to answer, but he cut her off. "You kids drink like calves." Then he turned to me. "You gonna chip in for groceries when you're older, Ava?" I was 10. I said yes. He laughed, patted my head. "Good girl. At least you're learning early." That's how it always went, these little jabs dressed as jokes, moments that didn't seem cruel until years later when I realized they weren't meant to be funny. Every story Mom told about Evan got smaller, nastier, and more convenient. When she was tired, he was the reason. When we couldn't afford something, it was because your father never paid a dime. When Rick was in a bad mood, it was because your father left me to do everything alone. We learned to flinch at his name. Even hearing Evan on TV made Mom's eyes harden. Lily, the youngest, didn't even remember him. It was smaller than the rest, tucked behind a stack of yellowing photo albums. The lid was sealed with a strip of painter's tape, my name written across it in black marker, AVA. "Hey," I said, brushing off the dust. "What's this one?" Mom didn't look up. "Probably your old school papers. Just toss it if it's ruined." Her tone was too casual. Mom never let go of my school stuff. She'd saved every spelling test, every art project with a crooked heart. I felt a strange pull in my chest as I peeled the tape away. Inside was a stack of envelopes. Each one had my name printed neatly on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. The return address was always the same. E.R. Lawson, Maple Street, Brookhaven. The dates stretched over years from when I was 5 until around the time I turned 10. Some had been stamped "Return to Sender." Others were unmarked, but their edges were frayed, as if opened and resealed. My stomach went cold. "Mom?" I called, holding one up. "Did I get mail when I was little?" She barely glanced over. "Junk. We used to get those sweepstakes things with your name on them." "This isn't junk." I flipped through them again. Everyone had that same steady handwriting, the kind that takes its time. "Mom," I said more firmly, "who's E.R. Lawson?" The flashlight beam jerked. For a second, she froze completely. Then she turned, slow and deliberate, and said, "You don't need to go through old stuff, Ava. It's all garbage." Her voice was too sharp for garbage. She started toward me, hand outstretched, but I stepped back, clutching the box like a shield. "Is this from him?" I asked. She didn't answer. "From my dad." Her mouth opened, then closed. "He doesn't deserve," she started, but I didn't let her finish. I knelt down, picked the top envelope, and slid my thumb under the flap. The paper made that quiet tearing sound that feels louder than shouting. Inside was a folded letter and something glossy. A photograph. A man in a blue shirt standing in front of a bowling alley, squinting into the sun, a small cake balanced on the hood of his car. My name was written on it in red icing. "Happy birthday, Ava." The letter was short. "Hey, Peanut. I don't know if you'll get this. Your mom said you've been taking swimming lessons. I'm proud of you. Keep kicking. You don't have to see the shore to know it's there. I miss you. Love, Dad." The world tilted. For 20 years, I'd been told that man didn't care enough to write, call, or visit. And here he was in ink, in color, loving me in real time while I grew up learning to hate him. Mom, I whispered. He wrote me. She didn't move. The flashlight flickered in her hand. Put it back, she said quietly. I looked at her. You opened them. She said nothing. You opened my mail, I said louder. You opened them and you never. My throat closed up. Why? She inhaled, steady and slow, like she was counting. You don't know what that man did to me, she said. He was trying to confuse you. He wanted to play the victim. By sending birthday cards? The words came out sharper than I intended. Her face twisted. You think I liked being the bad guy? You think I wanted to raise you alone? I was protecting you, Ava. From him. Protecting me from what? But she didn't answer. She just turned away and said, some things don't need to be reopened. I think that was the moment I stopped seeing her as my mother and started seeing her as a person flawed, afraid, and desperately trying to hold on to a version of the story that made sense. When she went downstairs, I stayed. The attic light buzzed overhead. The box sat in front of me like a crime scene. I opened letter after letter, 10, 15, 20 of them. Some were sweet. Some were heartbreakingly mundane. He talked about Eli's science project, Lily's favorite stuffed bear, the dog we never got. He mentioned things only someone paying attention would know. And then there were the ones that broke me. Letters sent after birthdays we'd spent crying, Christmases when Rick couldn't afford gifts, times Mom had said Evan didn't even try. I dropped off presents at the door, but they were gone the next morning. I called, but no one answered. I'll keep trying. I'll never stop trying. There were a few with money orders still attached uncashed. Each one had been folded neatly back into its envelope. By the time I got to the bottom of the box, my hands were shaking. The final envelope was smaller, thinner. On the back, in a child's handwriting, was a drawing. 3 little stick figures, 1 tall, 2 small, surrounded by a heart. The heart had been traced and retraced so many times the paper was worn through. I didn't remember drawing it, but I knew I had. Mom always said I'd been the artsy one. And there it was, my handwriting, my heart. Inside was one last letter. No date. No return stamp. Just a few lines, shaky but legible. Ava, if you're reading this someday, it means you're old enough to decide for yourself. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped being your dad. Don't let them tell you I didn't try. Love, Dad. The house creaked below me, footsteps, maybe. Or ghosts. I folded the letter back, slid it into the envelope, and sat there until the attic air turned thin. Everything I'd believed, every story, every truth felt suddenly weightless, like dust I could blow away if I just exhaled hard enough. I heard Rick's truck pull into the driveway, his heavy boots on the steps, Mom's voice carrying up the hall. And I realized I couldn't unknow this now. The story was changing, one envelope at a time. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's handwriting, neat, careful, heartbreakingly polite, and my mother's words cracking underneath it. He never sent anything. He didn't want you. He left. When she left for work, I called Eli. He drove over that afternoon, still in his mechanic's uniform. I showed him the box. He didn't say much at first. He just stared at the envelopes, his thumb tracing one of the postmarks. Then he whispered, she lied. It wasn't a question. It was a statement so heavy it seemed to bend the air around it. I nodded. All of them. Every story. Every he never called, he did. Every he didn't care, he did. Eli sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples. You realize this changes everything, right? I laughed bitterly. Yeah. Our whole childhood just got rewritten. He picked up one of the open letters. You think Rick knew? I hesitated. I think Rick knows everything. When Mom came home that night, she found the box on the kitchen table again, open this time, every letter lined up in neat, accusing rows. Her keys clattered to the floor. What are you doing? She said, voice trembling. Reading, I said. Learning. You had no right to go through that. They were addressed to me. Her words caught in her throat. She looked smaller, cornered. You don't understand, she whispered. Eli stood. Then make us. She shook her head. It's complicated. Try us. She looked between us, 2 grown children, suddenly strangers to her, and said, you were so little. He'd disappear for weeks. He couldn't hold a job. He made promises he couldn't keep. I did what I had to do. By erasing him? I said. I protected you, she said, tears rising. He made me feel unsafe. He made me question everything. I wasn't going to let him do that to you. Eli's voice cracked. You punished him by punishing us. She didn't deny it. She just sank into a chair and covered her face. That night, Rick came home. I don't know if Mom called him or if he could just smell the tension like smoke, but the moment he walked in, he knew. He saw the letters. His jaw tightened. So you found the junk, he said. Not junk, I said. Letters. From my dad. He smirked. Except now, I had proof that none of that was true. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. At 2 a.m., I went back to the attic. I sat cross-legged on the floor with a flashlight, the letters spread out like a paper crime scene. I started reading them again, all of them, in order this time. The first few were from when I was 5, short and cheerful. Hey, Peanut. Did you get the stuffed dolphin I sent? You named the last one Flipper, so maybe this one's Flopper? I know swimming lessons can be scary, but the trick is to keep kicking. You're brave. You always were. Then came the ones where the tone changed, little tremors of desperation under the surface. Your mom said you were sick last month. I called the hospital, but they wouldn't put me through. I hope you're okay. Please know I'm thinking about you every day. I tried to come by on your birthday. The porch light was on, but no one answered. I left your present by the steps, a little bracelet I found that made me think of you. Maybe you'll find it someday. I read until my eyes blurred. Until the words started to slur together, and I couldn't tell where my guilt ended and his love began. In the morning, Mom acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee. She asked if I wanted pancakes. Her voice was soft, too soft, like she was tiptoeing through a minefield. I stared at her across the table. Why did you keep them? She didn't flinch. She just stirred her coffee, slow and deliberate. He didn't deserve to talk to you. He was trying to, I said. For years. He was trying to control me, she snapped. That man would send letters just to get under my skin. To make me feel guilty. I leaned back. So you decided we didn't deserve to know him either? Her eyes flicked up, hard and cold. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me, I said quietly. She didn't. She just got up, dumped her coffee in the sink, and said, Don't romanticize him, Ava. He wasn't the man you think he was. Your father was a coward who couldn't handle life. I told your mom to stop letting him play the victim. I'm not sorry for that. Did you tell her to hide this? I asked, my voice shaking. He shrugged. She did what she thought was right. I agreed. That's not right, I said. That's control. He took a slow step closer. You're getting emotional. I get it. You found your little fairy tales. But that man wasn't who you think. Neither are you, I said. That stopped him. For the first time in my life, Rick didn't have a comeback. He just looked at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule, the one that said he got to define reality and I was supposed to live inside it. Then he laughed low, cold, and said, You'll regret digging this up. Some truths don't make things better. He walked out, leaving the door half open behind him. I stood there listening to the night air whistle through the gap, thinking how strange it was that freedom and fear could sound the same. Later, Eli and I sat in the living room surrounded by paper ghosts. He picked up one letter, the last one. Ava, if you're reading this someday, it means you found the box. It means I didn't give up for nothing. I hope you know I never left. I was just shut out. He folded it carefully, almost reverently, and said, We have to tell Lily. I nodded, though my chest ached. Because Lily was still the believer, the one who thought Rick hung the moon and Mom could do no wrong. And I was about to ruin that for her. Before I went to bed, I found the photo again, my dad, the cake, the sunlight. I placed it on my nightstand, next to the lamp. For the first time in my life, I whispered, Good night, Dad. It felt strange and right at the same time. Like I'd just opened a door that had been waiting for me my whole life. Lily was the hardest part. She'd always been Mom's echo, loyal, soft-spoken, the kind of person who'd rather bleed quietly than raise her voice. Telling her felt like betraying her. But hiding it felt worse. We waited until Sunday, when she came over for lunch. The house was too quiet, even the air felt like it was listening. Eli and I exchanged a look across the table, and I said, "Lily, there's something we need to show you." She smiled, confused. "Why do you both look like you're about to tell me someone died?" "In a way," Eli said softly. "Someone did." We led her to the living room. The box was waiting, the same one I'd found in the attic, the one Mom couldn't quite meet eyes with anymore. Lily frowned when she saw it. "Is that?" "Just read one," I said, handing her the top envelope. She opened it carefully, her fingers trembling just a little. Her eyes moved across the page, lips parting. "Hey kiddo. I heard you started ballet. I wish I could see you dance. I'm proud of you, no matter what anyone says." Her hand flew to her mouth. "He wrote to me?" "He wrote to all of us," I said. "For years." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "Why would Mom hide this?" Eli's voice was steady but sharp. "Because it didn't fit the story." We sat there for hours, the three of us reading in silence, broken only by the sound of paper unfolding and quiet sniffles. Some letters were silly. Some were small heartbreaks on lined paper. Lily lingered on one that said, "Tell your brother I still have his dinosaur drawings on my fridge. Tell your sister I think she's smarter than both of us put together." When she finished, she whispered, "I used to have nightmares that he forgot my name." I said, "He never forgot." She started to cry. Not loud sobs, but the kind of crying that sounds like someone's trying not to make noise. Eli pulled her close. And for a long moment, we were kids again, three people who'd been raised inside a story, finally realizing it had been fiction. Mom came home mid-afternoon. She stopped when she saw us on the couch, letters spread out like a paper storm. Her voice was brittle. "You went through them again." Lily stood. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom's eyes darted between us, between the hurt and the disbelief. "Because it wasn't good for you to know." "You mean it wasn't good for you," I said. She closed her eyes, inhaled. "You were too young. He was unstable. He used to show up without warning, call at all hours. He couldn't handle life." Eli's jaw clenched. "He handled writing to us for a decade." Her hands started to shake. "You don't know the whole story." "Then tell us," I said. But she didn't. She just turned, like she was retreating. "Not with him here." I frowned. "With who?" And that's when we heard the sound of Rick's truck pulling into the driveway. The air in the room changed, tightened. Mom wiped her face quickly, smoothed her hair, like putting her mask back on. Lily whispered, "Ava." But I was already standing. Rick walked in, keys jangling, smile sharp. "Well, isn't this cozy?" His gaze landed on the letters. Digging up the past again?" I said, "We're done pretending." He chuckled, setting his tools down. "Pretending what? That your father was a loser who ran off? That your mother saved you from turning out like him?" "He didn't run," Eli said quietly. "You made sure of that." Rick's face hardened. "Careful, boy." Eli stood. "No. You don't get to scare us anymore." Rick stepped closer, that old tension filling the room. "Watch your tone." I moved between them. "You told her to keep the letters, didn't you? You made sure we never saw them." His smile was thin and ugly. "Someone had to keep this family together. Your mother was falling apart." "By lying to her kids?" I said. He shrugged. "You wouldn't understand. You were just children. You needed a man who wouldn't disappear." "You mean a man who needed control?" He slammed his fist on the table. "You think you know everything because you found a few damn letters? You don't know what that man was capable of." "Neither did you," I shot back. "Because you never let us find out." Mom finally spoke, voice trembling. "Rick, stop." He turned to her, incredulous. "Don't you dare take their side after all these years." "I'm not taking sides," she said. "I'm tired." He stared at her for a long second, jaw working. "You're weak," he said finally. "Always were." And then he grabbed his keys and walked out. The door slammed so hard it shook the walls. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. Lily whispered, "Is he coming back?" Mom sank into the chair, covering her face. "I don't know." Eli crossed his arms. "Do you want him to?" She didn't answer. We stayed like that for a while, the three of us standing there, her sitting, the letters scattered between us like evidence. Finally, I said, "You need to tell us the truth. All of it." Mom's voice cracked. "There's nothing left to tell." Then I'll find it myself. I walked out before she could reply. That night, I sat in my car for hours outside the old post office, staring at the return address from the letters. Brookhaven wasn't far. 2 hours, maybe less. Some part of me already knew what I was going to do. Eli joined me the next morning, coffee in hand. You really think he's still there? I don't know, I said. But I need to see for myself. He nodded. Then let's go. Brookhaven was smaller than I imagined, all peeling paint and forgotten porches. We found the address, but the house was gone, replaced by a duplex with fresh siding. A neighbor watering her plants saw us looking. Are you looking for someone? She asked. Evan Lawson, I said. Her face softened. You're his kids, aren't you? My breath caught. You knew him. She nodded. Quiet man. Always brought flowers for the nurses down at the clinic. Talked about you three all the time. He used to say he was waiting for you to find him. My throat tightened. Do you know where he is now? She hesitated. Last I heard, he got sick. Passed a few years back. Cancer, I think. The world went silent. I think I whispered, oh. But the word didn't feel big enough. Eli reached for my hand, his grip steady. The woman said softly, he was a good man. You look like him. We drove home in silence. No music. No words. Just the hum of the highway and a hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. We hadn't come to find him alive. But somehow, even in death, he'd managed to reach us. The week after we found out he died felt like living underwater. Everything was slow, muted. Even the air in the house seemed too heavy to breathe. Mom didn't ask what we'd learned. Rick didn't come back. And I couldn't stop wondering what would have happened if we'd found those letters sooner. Would he still be alive? Would I have known him before he became a memory? Eli and I sat in silence most nights, our conversations looping around guilt like a drain that wouldn't unclog. Lily tried to hold us together, but her own grief was showing through the cracks. I don't even remember his voice, she said one night, eyes rimmed red. It feels like mourning a stranger. I didn't tell her that I didn't remember either. I just said, we can still find pieces of him. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Hi, a woman's voice said, careful and soft. Is this Ava? Ava Lawson. Yes. My name's Sarah Quinn. I was a friend of your father's. The room tilted. You knew him? Yes. I helped care for him when he was sick. He talked about you and your siblings all the time. There was a pause, heavy but kind. He left something for you. Sarah lived in a small apartment over a bookstore in Millbridge, the next town over. When I arrived, she greeted me at the door like someone who'd been expecting a ghost. You look just like him, she said, then covered her mouth, embarrassed by her own honesty. Inside, her place smelled like tea and old paper. Photos lined the shelves, mostly of landscapes and people I didn't know. She brought out a small wooden box and placed it between us. He wanted you to have this. The box was plain, carved with his initials, Irel. The lock had been removed long ago. Inside were photos, postcards, and a notebook with the cover almost falling off. He kept that by his bed, Sarah said. He called it his second chance. I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. My father's. The first page read, if they ever want to know me, this is what I'd tell them. I started reading. July 2001, Ava likes purple. Eli wants to be a paleontologist. Lily has a laugh that could fix bad days. Their mom won't take my calls. I write letters she won't give them. Maybe someday they'll find them. Maybe someday they'll see I never stopped trying. I blinked hard. My throat tightened. Sarah poured tea but didn't interrupt. He kept every photo you sent from school, she said quietly. Even the one from your first recital. I think he got that from your aunt. Aunt Carol. She nodded. Carol used to send him updates. Small things. He said it was enough to keep him breathing. I flipped further. The entries became less hopeful. 2007, I tried to visit. Rick met me in the driveway. Told me if I came back, he'd call the police. Said the kids were better off. I left the gifts anyway. When I drove past the next day, they were gone. 2010, I saw Ava at the gas station. She didn't recognize me. I didn't stop her. What would I have said? That I was the ghost everyone warned her about? 2016, The doctor says the cancer's moved. I keep the letters in a box by the bed. Maybe one day, someone will open it and know I tried. I closed the notebook, shaking. I didn't know, I said, voice cracking. We never knew. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. He did. When I looked at her, the rise and fall of her breathing, the faint frown she wore even in dreams, I realized the story had changed again. There wasn't a hero and a villain anymore. Just people. Broken in different directions, doing the best they could with the stories they told themselves to survive. It's been 6 months since I opened the box in the attic. 6 months since the story I'd lived in since childhood cracked down the middle and showed me what was underneath. Rick moved out 3 weeks after the confrontation. He didn't fight. He didn't even slam the door this time. Just packed his tools, muttered something about ungrateful kids, and left. Mom stayed in the house for a while, but it wasn't really hers anymore. Every wall still hummed with his voice. She sold it last month, said she wanted a smaller place, something without ghosts in the insulation. We helped her move. There were still boxes labeled seasonal and kid stuff, but none of them were taped shut this time. The attic ladder creaked when I climbed it one last time. The air smelled the same, dust and endings. I looked at the empty space where the box had been and thought about how truth hides in the quietest corners. Then I turned off the light and came down. Mom and I don't talk about Rick much anymore. When we do, it's careful, like handling glass that might still cut. She started therapy. So did Lily. Eli goes sometimes, too, though he pretends it's just for the free coffee. We're not the family we used to be. But maybe that's a good thing. The old version of us was built on silence. This one, at least, is honest, even when it hurts. Sometimes Mom still tries to explain. I thought I was protecting you, she says. I didn't know how to be strong without being cruel. I tell her I understand. Some days, I even mean it. I keep the notebook by my bed. I've read it so many times the pages are soft. There's one entry I come back to more than the others. She told me about the last few years, the clinic visits, the treatments, the way he'd talk about us like we were still 10 and waiting for him to show up at the door. He kept hoping you'd find him, she said. Even near the end, he'd check the mail. Every day. That image, him waiting by a window, fragile and hopeful, gutted me more than anything else. He wasn't angry? I asked. Angry. Sarah shook her head. He forgave your mom long before he forgave himself. When I drove home that night, the world outside the windshield felt surreal. The roads, the fields, the sky, all the same as they'd always been, but I wasn't. When I got back, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, the same spot she'd been in the night we found the letters. She looked up when I walked in. You went to see her, she said. Not a question. Yes. Her eyes were tired, rimmed in red. What did she tell you? The truth. Her hands trembled. Did she tell you he scared me? I hesitated. She told me he loved us. She flinched. Love isn't always safe. I sat down across from her. Neither is lying. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, he wasn't perfect, Ava. He'd lose jobs, disappear for days. I was terrified of raising you in that instability. When Rick came along, he promised to keep us safe. I let him rewrite the story because it made sense of the mess I'd made. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to erase him. I just didn't know how to live with what I'd done. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because for the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw a woman who'd made fear into faith and then built a family on top of it. That night, I took the notebook out of my bag. I read the last entry again. If they ever know the truth, I hope they see that we were both trying to protect them from different ghosts. I folded the page and left it on Mom's nightstand while she slept. But I remember glancing at the crowd and wondering stupidly, pointlessly, if my real father would have come if he'd known. That thought stayed with me through college, through jobs, through relationships that all ended the same way, me apologizing for taking up space. It's strange how early you learn your own unworthiness, when love always came with an asterisk. The years blurred. Rick got grayer, Mom got quieter, and the house started to smell like dust and old secrets. I moved out, moved on, or tried to. Then came the call. Can you come home, Ava? The roof's leaking. We need to clear the attic before the inspector comes. It sounded like a chore, but I said yes anyway. Because no matter how far I moved, I still felt tethered to that house, to that story. And when I climbed up into that attic, flashlight in hand, I didn't know that I was about to dig up the dead animal Rick warned me about. I didn't know that the story that had defined my life was already crumbling under the weight of its own lies. It started like any other chore. A favor. A quick weekend trip home to help Mom clear some space. That's what she called it, space, like grief and secrets took up physical room. The attic ladder creaked when I pulled it down. I remember how the air changed, that dry, dusty smell of insulation and cardboard, sharp and old enough to sting. Mom was already up there, crouched over a pile of boxes, flashlight wedged between her teeth. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the house had shrunk her. "Careful with the rafters," she said, voice muffled. "Your brother fell through once." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. It felt strange, standing in the house that I grew up in, realizing how foreign it had become. The wallpaper was the same, but the silence was different, heavier. We started sorting. Old clothes, school projects, boxes labeled Christmas, Eli's toys, Lily's artwork, and then one I didn't recognize. If they ever find me, I hope they don't hate me for the silence. Sometimes love isn't about being loud, it's about staying, even when no one knows you're there. It doesn't sound like the man Mom described. It sounds like someone who loved quietly and lost loudly. I think that's what scares me most, how much of who I am came from a version of love that was buried. Lily and I visited the hospital in Millbridge last month. They'd turned the old wing into a garden, stone benches, small trees, a fountain that never quite drowned out the traffic. There was a plaque by the entrance. "In memory of Evan R. Lawson for the ones who never stopped trying." We stood there a long time. Lily held a single sunflower. She set it at the base of the plaque, whispered something I didn't catch, and smiled through her tears. When she walked away, I stayed behind. I pressed my fingers to his name and whispered, "I found you." The wind moved through the trees like an answer. I've learned something about grief since then. It doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from understanding, from realizing the person you were angry at doesn't exist anymore, and maybe never did. For years, I hated my father for leaving. Then I hated my mother for lying. Now I don't hate anyone. I just ache. And maybe that's what healing really is, not forgiveness, but making peace with the ache that stays. I moved into my own apartment last month. New city, new job, new start. On my bookshelf, there's a framed photo of my dad, the one from the bowling alley, sunlight in his eyes, cake on the hood of his car. Next to it is a picture of Mom, taken just last week. She's laughing, hair pulled back, holding a mug that says "Start Over." Some nights I sit on the couch, notebook open, rereading his words. And every time, they sound a little less like pain and a little more like closure. I don't know if I believe in redemption. But I do believe in choices, the ones we make, the ones we inherit, the ones we unmake when we finally know better. I've started writing again. Stories, essays, fragments. Sometimes I write about him. Sometimes about her. Sometimes about the version of myself that grew up caught between them, a girl learning that love isn't the same thing as safety, and that truth can save and wound at the same time. Maybe that's the story I was meant to tell all along. Last night, I dreamed I was in the attic again. The box was there, but it was empty. Not sad empty, peaceful empty. Like it had finally done its job. When I woke up, I understood something I hadn't before. The box wasn't proof of a lie. It was proof that someone, somewhere, never stopped hoping the truth would find me. I don't know if my mother and I will ever completely fix things. I don't know if forgiveness will come, or if it even should. But when I think about her now, I don't feel anger. I feel empathy for the woman who made terrible choices, and for the man who kept loving us anyway. I used to think I was trapped between their versions of the truth. Now I think maybe I'm meant to carry both, not as a burden, but as a reminder. Because in the end, there are no heroes in this story. Just people trying, failing, and loving the best they know how.